Hello everybody and welcome back to the Fortress of Solitude. Today we're going to be checking out Action Comics issue 1058 by Philip Kennedy Johnson, Jean Lewin Yang, Greg Hahn, Rafa Sandoval, Victor Bogdanovic, and Travis Mercer. The New World story continues with Clark battling the evil Superman created by Nora Stone, the leader of the Blue Earth movement. Johnson drops more hints about who the people are, hinting at a past history with Superman and his family. The actual fight doesn't actually last that long, and in a nice bit of continuity, Clark utilizes some of Supercorp's defenses to aid him in battling the evil doppelganger. I've always loved the Superman stories where the plots have Clark having to resort to other powers or like armors or weapons to defend himself, and it's always cool seeing how writers work those into stories and come up with a way to make them a actual plot point and not just because it looks cool. Here as well, we get a writer working with another writer's concepts and plots, like Williamson's Supercorp tech, and building on the stuff that Williamson is doing with Supercorp over in the Superman ongoing. Character-wise as well, it's a great use of the powers that he has in Supercorp, with Clark not really wanting to use them, but knowing that he has to keep them around in case an incident like this does happen and he does lose his powers and he has to fight someone like Zod or Krillux, that it's good to have these sort of anti-Superman weapons lying about that will actually help him in a pinch, which it does indeed this issue. He's also really smart when it comes to the powers that he's combating, because of course he knows those powers because they're his. So he's well aware that this man who's using his powers doesn't fully understand them, so he can use that to his advantage, like making him listen to certain frequencies and noises that will deafen him, or having him use his heat vision all at once that will just deplete his energy reserves. It's some very smart writing on Johnson's part. The rest of the main plot of the book is more awesome lore building, something Johnson's time on Action Comics has done immaculately, and we dive deeper into the lore of Krypton, specifically the lore of the House of Ra, House Osel and Othel both belong to. Johnson uses Supergirl to deliver this bit of lore, which is a really great idea, being that she's experienced with Kryptonian culture firsthand, and she was an archaeologist studying ancient portions of Krypton, as seen in the recent Doomsday Action Comics special. While this part of the lore dump was pretty cool, it was also a little heavy-handed, as the story Kara tells the kids relates to the Red Sun and the Star Child, two warriors from warring tribes who came together for peace. Now I could be wrong and it could go in a completely different direction, but I feel like this directly represents Osel and Othel, even so far as that both of these old warriors have the red and blue costumes, very much like how Osel and Othel wear red and blue respectively. It's even more evidence with the final sequence of the book where Nora Stone tells her unseen bosses that they could turn a member of the Superman family and make them join them. That, along with details like Othel getting into fights at school and how she's reacted violently in the past, I feel like she could be the one to turn. But also, with that being said, it could also be a red herring, and it could actually be Osel, who is still carrying the fire of Olgren within him, and that's something that still hasn't really been addressed after all of this time, though I have to figure Johnson is building up to that being a big reveal coming up, especially because here and there we've had hints, and everything seems to point to Osel having a handle on the fire of Olgren, since we haven't seen it for a while, but also that could just be a bait and switch, since Osel hasn't really had a lot of character development since that reveal that he has the fire still within him, and he kind of unleashed it when Orion and all the New Gods attacked. They've been keeping him quite quiet, and I wonder if that's maybe on purpose, and maybe we will get a story that reveals him to be a turncoat against the family, and the fire of Olgren is the reason for that. The reveals don't stop there, as Superman, whose powers were siphoned from him by Nora and given to her people, turns to Steelworks to make him a set of armor to combat the Blue Earth with. Johnson returns to the sword and sorcery stuff he brought to the book and makes Superman a literal knight in shining armor, and I'm all for that, since as I said, I really loved the Superman stories where he turns to other powers or weapons or armors that give him an edge over a villain, and it also gives the artist a chance to design something really cool for the hero and kind of borrow elements from other characters like Steel, which is a really neat idea, since Steel obviously borrowed a lot from Superman, and now Superman is borrowing a lot from Steel, bringing things full circle. The book's stories don't stop there, as we have two backups this issue, with the first one being Jean Lewin Yang returning to Kenan Kong with a really neat backup that explains how he joins the Superman family, and it's quite a doozy. Kenan himself turns out to be a spy for the Batman of China, as he has been sent by his friend to investigate the family to see if there's a murderer in their midst, as the Batman of China has one of his only friends die, and we find out that this man was a reporter who was close to finding Superman's secret identity. It's fun seeing Kenan, who, because the story takes place earlier in Johnson's Action Comics run, still is trying to learn about America and what certain things mean and how to talk English and how some jokes go over his head, and yet he's still trying to learn them and still trying to act funny to them and everything. It's really quite cool to see all of that play out, especially because we didn't really get much of that in the new Superman book that he debuted in. It was all mainly set in China and all about Chinese villains and monsters and their culture and everything, so there was never that sort of fish out of water idea with Kenan, and I like that Gene is finally playing with that here. Also, since it's been a while since we actually focused on Kenan, I also forgot that he isn't, for better lack of a word, very Supermanly, in that he calls the super twins little creeps and doesn't really like them because they creep him out a little bit, but he has to say they're nice because he wants to try and get in with the family. And I like that Gene is playing with that idea that it's because also he comes from a different culture, and how people act in his culture is different from how people act in American culture, and I like that sort of clash and him sort of trying to navigate around that and sort of figure out what he can say, what he can't say, what jokes are, and all of that sort of stuff. It's really interesting. Through the super twins snooping around in Kenan's life, Superboy learns that Kenan is indeed spying on them and trying to find out their identities, but not because he wants to help Batman, but wants to stop a killer, or find out if there actually is a killer. This is where Gene gets really smart with the story, as Kenan ends up learning who Superman's secret identity is, but because of what Lex Luthor did by telepathically erasing the world's memory of Clark Kent being Superman from when he outed himself, he ends up having a stroke and dies. Just like what happened to the reporter at the beginning of the story, and also what happened to Perry White at the beginning of Joshua Williamson's Superman run. This perfectly sets up the story to send Connor and the Super Twins on an adventure to save Kenan, explore more of Kenan's own lore with the Chinese afterlife, as well as more of why he is a Superman and how he became a Superman, which was more in-depth in his Superman book, so I imagine we'll go back on that and sort of refresh people on what he exactly is. And it will also cap out how Kenan actually ends up properly joining the Superman family, like we have seen him in the Action Comics main stories. It's really a lot of a backup to deal with, and it gives much more meat than a lot of backups usually get, and it lets us get more Kenan and more of his story. And I'm totally for that, especially if it's written by Gene Luen Yang, since he birthed this character and he really made the character his own, and I'm all for a unique take on a Superman character. More often than not, they often end up being cookie cutter characters of Clark or of Kara. So I like that they're branching out into a new and interesting character, and again, I can't wait to explore more of Kenan's backstory and his culture's backstory with how he is a Superman, and it was just so much fun seeing all of that in the new Superman book, and I can't wait to see Gene bring more of that back into this book. The final backup by Greg Hahn builds on Johnson's original story with Bibbo and the Super Twins at the zoo, and is a very light palate cleanser after the two previous plot-heavy stories. It's just Super Twins experiencing the Metropolis Day Parade with Uncle Bibbo. That's it for the story, really. We do get small bits and pieces we've seen in the two previous stories, like Othel being rather protective of her brother and mostly resorting to violence whenever someone, makes fun of him or tries to touch him or something. But it's mostly light-hearted, fish out of water hijinks, and if it means we get more Bibbo, then that's totally fine. And I would actually love to see this become a standard for this book, and every issue the kids get to go out with Uncle Bibbo and experience something kids should experience, like going to theme parks or going to the beach. Again, it's just really light-hearted, it's a palate cleanser, and I'm all for it. Johnson and his teams continue to build the lore and plot of Action Comics really well, revealing some new cool parts of Kryptonian culture and a bit more about the bad guys threatening Superman and his family and Metropolis, rounding out everything with two really fantastic backup stories that further build on the book's running warworld plots, as as well as books and characters we haven't seen get the spotlight for a hot minute, like Kenan Kong. I'm excited to see what Philip Kennedy Johnson has for his final arcs on Action Comics, and if the last few issues are any indications, we are in for one hell of a ride. I'm going to give this issue a 10 out of 10, so check it out. And if you haven't been keeping up with Johnson's era of Action Comics, I highly recommend it. It is genuinely some of the best Superman content we have had in 5 years, and you can't go wrong with it. It has something for everyone, and more importantly, it's a different Superman story than what we've seen before, couched within very familiar things we've seen in Superman stories, so you can't go wrong with it.